Hot, hot, hotter than hell, baby. It is the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, Dragonaut One. Go down the list of names, baby. You know, I'm telling you, still somebody's got to come up with some great nicknames for Robin and I for TIE Fighter Renegades. You know, some Star Wars names. I could come up with them, maybe, but I don't know. You know, Grand Admiral Sovereign doesn't really roll. Well, no, that does kind of roll off the tongue. Oh, anyway, we're not here for that. You're here for your Wednesday Zomia ONE Underground only Q&A. And, I mean, it is hot. It's like 90 degrees here on Ice Planet Zero, so there's not much ice. Of course, we're talking about the lovely New Hampshire, my favorite place on the planet. I'm not wearing my glasses, and that's what made me think of it, because like I actually went to adjust my glasses, and they weren't there. And it's so hot that I took them off. But anyway, you know, something, I'm going to get into this on the gaming grid, which we're in July now, so we can do another gaming grid, and there's always plenty to talk about as far as the gaming grid. But I kind of want to get in another game review. But unfortunately, my schedule is so insane these days that... while I'm able, and recently been able to very much, get a lot of the content that needs to be out there on the days that it needs to be out there. And part of that also has to do with the great new sponsors that I've brought on. More to come. But, getting in time for a little video gaming sometimes can be a little difficult. But I did actually this past weekend. I got to check something out, and I will put a link in the show notes. To this guy's Etsy page. I know what you're thinking. This guy's Etsy page. Anyway, this guy gave me the hookup. So here's the thing. We have great tech questions. We have questions relevant to the last episode 332 of Sovereign Tech. We got plenty of shit to get in with. But I know a lot of you actually, you really enjoy. I've gotten, speaking of things sent in to me, I've had a lot of people say they love whenever I talk about not sound like a Ferengi, but recent acquisitions and, things that have come my way and things that I do. When I open up the Q&As, you really appreciate that. So instead of doing an entire show where I tell you about my day, I give you, a few minutes at the beginning of the Q&A where I guess, you like to hear this sort of stuff. So here we go. Anyway, this guy, I fucking can't pronounce his name. In fact, I'm going to try and bring it up and I'm going to give it a shot. Here we go. Let's see. Look at, nothing like bookmarks. Chrome's going to die real soon. I genuinely feel this way, that the world is turning away from this browser, especially because of Manifest v3, or at least for people that actually give a shit about their desktop environment, they're going to be ditching it. But one thing that almost, you remember when they switched, remember when Chrome switched to the star system instead of bookmarks? Man, I mean, that made me run back to Firefox. That's back when I was still a Google fanboy. That made me run back to Firefox so fast because fuck that, And I'm having a great time actually with that Opera GX browser. I love that. Oh, do I love that. It's so slick. Anyway, okay, so it's not as weird a name on Etsy, but the seller's name on Etsy, I don't need to tell you what Etsy is, it's all the handcrafted shit, right? Is Custom Backup and Art, UPN Art, and the custom begins with a K. Now this guy, I assume it's a guy, he, she, it, I'm good with any of that, they, I'm fine with any of that, does this tremendous work where I think they sell at cost. Okay, they're not making money off of this, and I'm sure it'd be funny business if they did. But honestly, with the games that he's offering, I don't think. I mean, how are you going to go after? Why would you go after him? Do these companies actually even care? It's not like it's Nintendo, and he's specifically dealing in. I don't even think he's dealing in any Nintendo consoles. Nope, there's not a Nintendo console in his list. He deals in Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, Sega CD, 3DO. That's exciting. 3DO, PlayStation 1, Xbox Classic. I guess that's, I never thought about that. What do you call the original Xbox? Xbox Classic. That makes sense. Oh, no, I'm wrong. He does have Wii. What games does he have for Wii? And he has PS2, which is of my biggest interest. Oh, Fatal Frame 4 and Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Good choices. Anyway, So that's interesting that he does do some business or he does sell some Nintendo games. So what he does is he sells backups, okay, ROMs. He'll send you basically like, if you bought, for example, for Sega Saturn, if you bought Panzer Dragoon Saga, and anybody that's a Saturn fan, how hard it is to get your hands on this game, what a pain in the ass it is to emulate this game. This is one of the greatest games ever made, and it's nearly impossible to play, for everyone to be able really to play. And it sells normally, say on eBay or Amazon, from used sellers, obviously, because the game's, 20 some odd years old. It sells for a ridiculous price. And he sells it for $35, but basically how he's making this work is that he makes custom artwork in a case, and the artwork is very nicely done. Either it's custom or it's the artwork similar to what was originally sold back in the day, right? And I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check all this out, because I really recommend you frequent this guy. I think he's doing the Dark Lord's work. And there are very few people, and I mean this, there are very few little businesses, especially individuals, that I think are genuinely doing like a wonderful service for humanity. And I think that the basis of humanity's existence is art. I think that, so if humanity's existence, nothing new for me to say here, I've said this before, if humanity's existence is inherently atheistic and anarchistic, okay, then his basis of existence is genuinely art. And we know that that's been the case for a very long time. How many cave paintings do we need to see to know that? And so art is a very important thing. Again, it's the basis of so much of what we call ethics and a lot of other things. I know you think it's not. And I suppose if you want to ask me a question about that, I could talk about it. But there's plenty of other anarchists that have written about this sort of thing. It's not, I came to that conclusion individually, but I know I'm not the only one who's done that. But art is an important thing. So when somebody does does great work for preserving art, and like it or not, because I know some people don't like to think this, but fuck you, and I mean that, fuck you, with the hardest of fucks. Video games are art. Especially, today, yeah, they're still kind of art. But back in the day, they very much were art, because they were creations of passion and of true innovation and genius, which I don't think so much is true today, because I think, as we talked about in episode 332 of Sovereign Tech, I think that video games have fallen prey to the lowest common denominator, where the budgets are so stupid, you have to sell millions of copies or downloads, because everything's digital, sadly. Not that I mind that. I'm just saying it's sad that that's often the only option, unless you have like limited run games, or you have like this guy on Etsy that we're talking about here. Where you have to sell that many, and so now you can't actually, you can't appeal to gamers anymore. You have to fucking appeal to everybody. And look, folks, most people are stupid. It's true. So anyway, this guy does this just tremendous work of preserving these games. And here's the rub. So I am a big proponent, and we've talked about this over the past couple of years, even on Wednesday Q&As. I'm a big proponent of and I've said this before because I've gotten the question. I remember, this is probably over a year ago, when somebody asked, Stallion, what is the greatest video game console of all time? And while I have a couple answers to that, if we're just basing it on what was so, pun intended, game changing, what was really impressive in all of this. It can be anywhere. I loved my GameCube, but let's be clear here. The video game system that was so wildly ahead of its time and had some things implemented in it that no other console has yet to replicate, is the Sega Dreamcast. That system was so fucking ahead of its time. In fact, I think, frankly, everything that it did was so expensive to maintain, because it was the first home console, I mean, PC gamers, the master race is doing all this shit long before anybody. Let's be clear on that. We're talking about consoles here, but, computer gaming PC gaming is where it's always at. Because the PC can do everything, right? Emulating, all that. But, like Phantasy Star Online, which actually that's ironic to talk about, because we're going to talk about Phantasy Star here in a second. And like I said, we have other questions to get into. Relax, okay? If you're not into gaming, don't worry. There's plenty of shit to talk about here that doesn't have to do with gaming. But I think this is important. So, but with the Dreamcast, it was internet connected. It had multiplayer. It was doing MMOs before even World of Warcraft was a big deal. There was just the VMU, the video memory unit, which was the memory card. Remember when consoles had memory cards? That you could actually, that had controls on it, like a D-pad and it looked like a little Game Boy, and you could actually play little games on it on the memory card's LCD. Awesome. So many brilliant, and all the different kinds of controllers, like the fishing rod controller that came out way before the Wii, that came out for the Dreamcast. Amazing. Goddamned amazing, that system. So the greatest system of all time, I'd give it to the Dreamcast. However, the system that, like in a more pragmatic or practical argument, that is the greatest of all time and is one of the top selling, depending upon what numbers you look at, is the top selling game system of all time. The Wii would be the only one that maybe would top it. That is the PlayStation 2. Now, why is this? Because the PlayStation 2 is very, ironically, and it's an interesting history to look into. There's great videos on YouTube about this, actually, about the history of copy protection on the PlayStation 2, because that copy protection, they tried so hard to make that copy protection like so airtight that, I'm reminded of the line, that Carrie Fisher famously gave as Princess Leia to Tarkin. The more you tighten your grip, the easier it is to slip through your fingers. Or the more star systems will slip through your fingers. Well, the more, they locked down the system so well, but they didn't lock down the fucking memory card. And so there's a great, I remember, I've been modding PS2s for a while. I remember the Agent Under Fire, the 007 game? There was the Agent Under Fire hack that you could use. But then Free McBoot became a thing, where basically you installed the software onto a memory card and it just opened the fucking PS2 up. And the PlayStation 2 now could have entirely custom software all running off of the memory card. And so now the PlayStation 2 basically, and Free McBoot's been around for a while, basically can play almost any system from the PlayStation 2 back. Just about. It can play, PlayStation 1. Obviously, the PS2 could do that anyway. It can play Super Nintendo, Nintendo. There's just a ton of systems that it can play. It is the system to own. And the beauty of it is no Wi-Fi. It has an Ethernet cable, depending upon which model you're getting and all this. It's a self-contained system that doesn't need the internet and just works so goddamn beautifully, right? So I love my PlayStation 2. I have my PS2 Slim right behind my computer here in my little studio, and always ready to, fire up and rock and roll, okay? You still have to do some funny things sometimes to get some of the systems to work. Like with PlayStation 1 games, you have to have an actual PlayStation 1 game, like an official one that you have to put in first, and then you can load up PSXE, and then you can put in your burned copy. Now, here's the thing. So while you can play copies and imports of PlayStation 2 games, some of them you have to, and you can play them off of USB. You can play them over your network if you want. There's so many great options with Free McBoot. But I like to use the discs, okay? Because, well, I use M discs and everything, and I just think that that's the most solid. The USB connection sometimes is slow, and that creates certain issues. I just like to run off of the disc, and if I have to replace my laser on my PS2 at some point, that's fine. I'll do that because I've already done that. That's how much I love the system. It's probably the electronic device I love the most next to my Kindle e-reader. Anyway, so most games you have to run through like ESR patcher, okay, and you burn it to a disk. And here's part of the problem, is that the game has to be for Free McBoot to recognize the backup. The game has to be a DVD, but for it to be a recognizable DVD, it has to take up more space than a CD. Okay? And not every game, especially some games that I really want to play, not every game actually needs a DVD. Some PS2 games were actually just on, like on CD. For example, Star Wars Racer Revenge. Okay? And it can be a pain. I've yet to find the instructions that do this really well, or that give you an easy way of doing this, where you basically put it onto a DVD so that ESR can read it on the PS2 and you can play it. You have to put like a dummy file that's like a gig to force it to be onto a DVD instead of a CD. Anyway, so this is a challenge that I've run into with with quite a few games that I'd actually like to play. And I still haven't found a really great answer for everything. Now, also, not only that, but also this is also true for PS1 games. There are some PS1 games that for some fucking reason won't work. Like Star Trek Invasion is one that I can't get to work. Colony Wars 3, both of those games are two of my top games for the original PlayStation. I mean, they'd make my top 10 list pretty easy. Neither of them, the backups that I make, work for some reason. And there's some others out there, some rarer games, okay, that don't work very well. One of those happens to be like Starblade Alpha, which is a rare Namco game, but an awesome like rail shooter. Picture like some of the levels on Star Fox, where you're just like shooting at, say, some of the asteroids and everything. It's like that, but it's very well done, and it's true, more true 3D graphics. So that's one that doesn't play very well when I do that. The other, and this is one that like I've had a hard time getting really to work, and it's a very expensive thing to get your hands on because it would be an import, is now if you have a Nintendo Switch, you're familiar with the Sega Ages line from M2, where they re-release games onto the Switch that were that are like classic Sega games, and they put in some new features and everything, and it's really great. I'm very supportive of that, of Sega doing that on the Switch. One of my favorite games of all time is Phantasy Star 4, okay? And the entire Phantasy Star series is great, including Phantasy Star Online. I really love that, and while I got into that on the Dreamcast as well, kind of the main place where I played Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2 was actually on my GameCube. Another reason that the GameCube is so great, but you had to buy the modem for it. Anyway, Phantasy Star 4. This was an amazing game. I owned it back on my Genesis back in the day. It was like a lot of people wanted it just because, holy shit, it's a $100 game at a time when games cost anywhere from $40 to $60 on average in the 90s, in the early 90s. What is a $100 game? Well, a $100 game like Phantasy Star 4 is one of the most epic RPGs you're ever going to play in your life. And now a lot of people don't know, but M2, the company behind, or the team behind the Sega Genesis Mini that's coming out in September, which looks really solid. We've talked about that on the Gaming Grid, okay? They are behind that. They are also behind the Sega Ages line on the Switch, but they were behind a Sega Ages line that was very popular in Japan. Never came over to the United States, but very popular in Japan. And one of the things that Sega Ages line did, in fact, it was called Sega Ages 2500, was they came out with, a couple things, but one of them is the Phantasy Star collection, okay? And you can find the disc image for this, and it's mostly, there's a lot of it in Japanese, but they offer all of the English versions on it. And so as long as you can get to where you can switch it over to the mode for Sega Genesis, everything's in English, and you can play it like it was a North American release, and it's awesome. And it is the purest release, even more pure than the Sega Ages for the Switch, frankly. It is the purest release of all of the Phantasy Star games, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there's a Phantasy Star Zero that came out for the DS. That's also a great game, and if you have a 3DS, rock and roll it on that. And I wanted this really badly because I love Phantasy Star 4, and I'd love to do like a full-on review, but I want to play it again before I do a full-on review of it for the Gaming Grid. Anyway, another thing that they did was they released what's called Phantasy Star Generations, and these were two different games, two different releases for Sega Ages. There's Phantasy Star Generations 1 and Phantasy Star Generations 2. this guy, so getting back to this Etsy guy, custom backup and art, he sold for, I forget what he sells it for. Anyway, I contacted him and, we did a little hookup. But he offers a collection, and he calls it the Phantasy Star Collection, where he sends you 3 discs. I think it's like $30 maybe that he sells it for in his store on Etsy. And it's this beautiful custom artwork, and you get 3 discs, and somehow he got these discs, which normally won't play through the general way that you make disc backups that work with FreeMcBoot on your PlayStation 2. Like, they won't ESR patch. You have to turn them into DVDs because they're actually just CDs. And sure, they're basic games. But he's got it so that it works. And he says, if you look right in his Etsy store, it says works with FreeMcBoot. And fuck, they do. And I was rocking them this weekend, and it's awesome. Again, once you get past the Japanese, I've been to Japan a lot. I know a little bit of Japanese, so I can navigate fairly well anyway. But it is fucking brilliant. And it's a gorgeous little collection. And, I don't really need the artwork because I just put all my, PS2 backups and PS1 backups. I just put them in a, like a Case Logic, hard case. But, the artwork is really, really nice. You're getting stuff that is worthy of being on your shelf, worthy of being put on display, so it's worth every dollar. It really is. And then also, I got a hookup with Starblade Alpha, which is, again, a very rare game. You're going to pay, I think he sells this one for maybe like $25. You're going to pay out of your ass to if you want to get like an official copy of it, if you can even find one. It's that rare. But such an awesome game, and it comes in a beautiful jewel case, PS1 style jewel case. And, he has the artwork that says Starblade Alpha on and everything. He also, and this is a real winner here, Police Nauts, which was only released in Japan, but a beautiful English translation of that has been done for both discs, and that's a 2-disc set. I think he sells that for like $25 as well, but all of it somehow, because like I got an image for Starblade Alpha, but when I burned it to CD, a lot of PS1 games work fine, but this one, for some reason, the disc wouldn't boot. I don't know why, but his does, and I want to know his secret sauce. And I've asked him, and I'll see what happens. But God, I want to know how the hell he pulled it off. Because same with Police Nauts, I couldn't get it to work, with the PS2. Now, all of this is to say, and holy shit, I've been talking for 20 minutes. I'm sorry. All of this is to say that you could just run this in an emulator on your PC, and as long as your PC is powerful enough, you can play these images without running into this ESR problem or the size of the, it needing to be on a DVD or whatever problem. You could avoid all of that. You don't, and I've checked out the image I have of Starblade Alpha plays beautifully on PSXE on my PC. So, you don't really have to go through this trouble. But part of it is that I really want that completely offline solution. I want that thing that doesn't require a computer. Because ironically, for somebody who is I'm a cybersecurity specialist, I have plenty of clients where I have to do all kinds of crazy work as far as that goes. Ironically, I am looking to have devices that, I can have fun on, but that aren't internet connected and aren't a computer, honestly. In fact, I was listening to the most recent Security Now, of course, the greatest podcast ever. I'd love to say it's Sovereign Tech, but no, Security Now is better than my show. And Steve Gibson's my hero. But he had a new acronym for IoT, or what IoT stood for. And IoT stands for Internet of Things, right? His new meaning for IoT is actually injection of Trojan, meaning that basically these IoT devices, all of them are just trouble, and they're just waiting to be, taken advantage of by, bad actors. And I think that's absolutely true. And so, I like having devices that don't connect to the internet. I'm not against electronic devices. I just like having ones that aren't IoT or that don't even have Wi-Fi chips in them, and so on. And so, PS2 is great, and I want to do it the old-fashioned way and pop in discs, and do my thing. So, anyway, maybe you want to do the same. It's a lot of fun. And this guy, though, custom backup and art, I mean, this is brilliant shit. You got to check out his site and see the stuff he has available. Some of the collections, like some of the compilations that he has on there, are amazing for like the PS2. And also, this is probably your best shot at, frankly, at playing, Panzer Dragoon Saga, with your, on a Sega Saturn. But anyway, there you have that. There's all that fucking story. Again, check it out in the show notes. Links there and rock and roll. So, okay, let's get on to some other things. Boy, I don't know if anybody else, did you check out the final Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw trailer? Fuck, that looks intense. God damn it. Like the shit with the motorcycle. Man, that's awesome. Makes me want to get back on a bike again. God damn it. That movie looks so insane. Okay, so let's get into some questions here. We got a kind of a tech question here at the beginning, and then we'll get into some other stuff. So here we go. Hey Stallion, been noticing the past few weeks that NEM43 and WorldwideTorrents.eu have been down pretty off and on. I know you've said that 1337x.to hosts their stuff in packages. I guess he means NEM43. But that often misses single issues from the indies. Any best alternatives you can offer would be hot. Keep rocking your shit and keep bleeding comic book ink. Nice. Yeah, okay. So, and also they asked, what titles are you reading right now? Okay. So anyway, all right, real quick. NEM43 is a group, most likely. NEM43 is a group that is... They are behind a lot of, if there are comic books available for you to torrent, they are behind that. Now, they're not the only one, but NEM43 or Nemesis 43 is probably the most popular. They've been around since like when Demonoid was the hot thing, and I mean that was like what, a decade ago. Even though Demonoid came back for a bit, they moved over to Kick-Ass torrents. Anyway, NEM43, talk about somebody doing the Dark Lord's work of another individual or group that's keeping art alive and fucking with DRM, which the importance of that. And around this entire conversation we've been having, this whole Q&A from episode 332. I mean, they're doing great work, and any comic you can think of they're putting up there. And they also put up a lot of classic stuff, like stuff that maybe wasn't available before, like there have been, especially like in the 90s when comic books were really white hot. You had, what was it, Continuity Comics? You had a few of these other like little companies, and like that's when Dark Horse became a thing, and some of them survived, like Dark Horse survived, but very few of these little companies, ended up surviving that whole thing, and we're still somewhat living within the duopoly of Marvel and DC, somewhat, okay? Even though those companies are owned by, larger conglomerates, right? Disney, Warner Brothers, so on. Anyway, so... Yeah, Nemesis 43 does great work. WorldwideTorrents.eu, this is basically a torrent site that became a thing a few years ago after Kick-Ass Torrents went down for the first time, or went down originally. And it sort of built itself around NEM43's comic book releases, okay? The people behind Worldwide Torrents reached out to me and gave me the score, because some of them actually listened to Sovereign Tech, and they told me, yeah, this is going to be it. And years ago, I told you about Worldwide Torrents and what was going on, and they've kept me updated pretty regularly. I don't exactly now, and this is years later, now I don't know exactly what's going on there. But yes, I've also noted that WorldwideTorrents.eu has been down. They came back, I think, last Wednesday for a little bit, and then they just keep going down. Now, granted, there have been like the outages this week alone in, start end of June, beginning of July 2019, like the Cloudflare outages and everything else going on. I mean, that could be a part of it, but it was happening before that was an issue, which we'll probably talk about some of that on an upcoming Sovereign Tech. I don't know what's happening there. So, but if you want alternatives, yeah, and especially to get single issues, there's one that is a torrent site, and it's still NEM43, and then there's one that's kind of a competitor to NEM43. So the torrent site, I'll tell you about that, and basically you just look later in the day. 1337x.to I think NEM43 does still post packages there, which is basically you get image. There's an image packet, like bundle of comics. And of course, you know, when you open it up in your torrent client, you can choose which comics you want. You don't have to download all of them because, you know, it'll be a couple gig or whatever, depending upon the week. There's the Image week, then you get the Marvel week and the DC week, where it covers all of those, you know, those various companies. Now, those are the only three that I usually see on 1337X. On it for some reason, the Indies package doesn't end up there. I don't know why. It's just something I've noticed. But there's another fairly, they're kind of new. They're not really new, but they've come into prominence lately. And that's Torrent Galaxy. It's torrentgalaxy.to. Okay. And NEM43 will post there, and they do get the indie package. Actually, it's not NEM43. It's the Comic Guy. It's a different name. I don't know who that is. But whatever, that is a website where, you know, we go there a little bit later in the day on Wednesday, and all of those packages will be up, or all those bundles will be up from, you know, Marvel, DC, Image, and then all the indies in one. And you can get your hands on that. If I think of it, I'll put a link in the show notes for that. But it's torrentgalaxy.to. And it's a pretty good torrent tracker besides, you know, not just comics. It does a good job outside of that as well. The other site, and this one isn't a torrent site, and they accept donations. Most torrent sites do too. They accept donations, and I do recommend giving them donations, because a few times, especially when Worldwide Torrents has gone down, because there's been a couple times where that's happened, where there's been extended periods of time where it's been down, and they don't inform like Torrent Freak. Torrent Freak is usually a great site to find, you know, news site. It's a great news site in general, but particularly to find out what's going on with certain torrent sites, perhaps. I don't know. There hasn't been a story covering worldwide torrents on Torrent Freak in years. So whatever, they're not telling us what's going on. You're not going to find anything on Twitter. Even on Reddit, if you look on Reddit, nobody really seems to know what's going on, even though some people claim to be in communication with them. Anyway, this site has been great, because when I'm missing like a certain issue for whatever reason, they will often have it, and they offer it as single issues, much like Worldwide Torrents would. But again, this site isn't a torrent site. It's a direct download. They offer a few different download options that you can go through, and you can take your pick of them. So anyway, yeah, the site is getcomics.info. Okay, it's kind of similar to like getmetal.club, where it's not a torrent site, but you get like every fucking release, right, of metal albums and everything. Getcomics.info. I've heard people, like, I've heard NEM43 kind of rip on Get Comics. I don't know why. I don't know. You know, the torrent scene, it's a subculture. You know, you have your little petty squabbles that occur within that as well. But getcomics.info does a great job. And they will, again, they'll upload stuff individually, and you can get your hands on it there. So again, that's getcomics.info. So those are my two alternatives that I will go to, you know, to jump on that. So, and just as a disclaimer, as usual, you probably want to run your VPN if you're going to these kind of sites, just putting that out there. Now, as far as your question as to what titles I'm reading right now, comic book wise, yeah, so I really don't read much from the biggies, you know, from Marvel or DC. There's a couple titles here and there that I read from those. But I read Conan. I read everything Conan from Marvel, especially since Marvel took over. I was reading Conan. Conan got a little nuts under Dark Horse. Like, it was very tough to follow. And I hope Marvel doesn't go that direction. I'm a little worried that they're going that direction with Conan already. They've already created, there's basically 3 or 4 titles within Conan just under Marvel, which Marvel just got the rights back for Conan in January. And you have Conan, there's Savage Sword of Conan, then there's Age of Conan comics with Belilt, I think her name is. There's that title that's running right now. There's Savage Avengers, which puts Conan in with like Wolverine and some others, which that's a mini-series, I think. But that's been an interesting title. I don't like that they're bringing Conan into Marvel proper. You know, like, and I think most people would get pissed off. Like, if Marvel pulled that, who are also publishing Star Wars, if Marvel put like Luke Skywalker in the Avengers, I think people would have a proper hissy fit, and I would too. Don't do it. Don't, like, Star Wars is Star Wars. Don't fucking mix it. You can't, because Star Wars doesn't have enough science. Like Star Trek, if you remember, mixed in with like Green Lantern. The Kelvin timeline mixed in with Green Lantern. And I thought that was, and really mixed in with the DC universe in general. And I thought that was very well done. I love the way that they did that. But Star Trek has that, you know, where they've traveled to alternate universes, you know, like the mirror universe, or where there's alternate, or there's other dimensions and things like this. Star Trek can pull that off because that's within Star Trek's realm. Star Wars is fucking Star Wars. Leave it as Star Wars. Do not. And I mean, even Marvel's, you know, Star Trek and Marvel. Remember the X-Men, Star Trek and X-Men crossovers? Those were great. I mean, those were, and they were funny. Like, remember when Dr. McCoy, like, you know, they call for Dr. McCoy, and Beast, who's Hank McCoy, you know, responds, as well as, you know, Dr. Leonard H. McCoy. That was hilarious. But yeah, leave Star Wars alone. I'm disappointed that they're bringing Conan into that, even though I did like when Conan mixed with Wonder Woman, but maybe that's just because I love Wonder Woman. Regardless, don't do it. So I'm a little worried about that, but the Conan comics that they have been putting out, the proper Conan comics, have been fantastic. I mean, they've been really, again, I liked what Dark Horse is doing for a while. I don't know, they got a little dark. They got a little, because Conan is funny. Like, people don't remember this. Conan is kind of a funny character. And you even get that in the movies with Arnold, right? Where, like, he punches the camel. Remember that? And Dark Horse, I feel like they just left that behind, and it just got really grim. Like, just way too stupidly grim. So I appreciate what Marvel is doing with Conan. I really like that, and I'm actually glad they got it. Initially, I didn't like the idea that Dark Horse was losing it because Dark Horse had such a great tradition, but Marvel is doing a great job with that. So the Conan comics are definitely one of the ones that I read on launch day or on release day. Star Wars, of course, you know that I do TIE Fighter Renegades. We review the comics pretty much every month. I read all the Star Wars comics, every single fucking one. I also read Star Wars Adventures from IDW, but that's a whole other conversation. Star Trek comics, I read every Star Trek comic that comes out there. I mean, I just do. You know, from IDW, they've been doing great work with that. Even the Star Trek Discovery comics have been, other than Light of Kahless, they've been better than the actual show. So, you know, I dig Star Trek comics. Like right now, they're running the year 5 for the original series. That's well done. Even though I think Star Trek Continues, the web show, is the true season. Well, I guess that'd be season 4. But anyway, whatever. I think that's the true bridge between, no pun intended there, with bridge. But it's the true bridge between the original series and Star Trek the Motion Picture. I think Star Trek Continues just fills that hole very nicely. I read Wonder Woman from DC. That is one of a couple DC comics that I read. I don't read Batman anymore. I actually don't like what they're doing with Batman, especially since the marriage. I didn't mind seeing his dick, which that happened. But I don't really read Batman anymore. I was reading Nightwing for a while, too. They got weird with that. I'm not... DC, Rob Liefeld's right. DC is falling apart at the seams. They have no fucking idea what they're doing. And really, I think if DC had any brains, and some of this they're actually doing with the other title that I read from DC, if DC had any brains, they would separate Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, even though I think they're doing shit with Batman. They would separate those 3 characters, make them their own universe, or if you want, make Wonder Woman completely her own universe. Okay, like just totally standalone. And maybe have the Green Lantern be his own universe, which that's kind of happening. That's the other title that I read ever since Grant Morrison took over for that. I've been reading the Green Lantern, and it's been, I mean, we're 9 issues deep, and it's a tremendous series. Those are the only 2 I read, and because you can kind of treat Wonder Woman, you can definitely treat the Green Lantern as its own like comic book universe. I really think that's what they should do. They have too many stupid titles. They have too many characters. I mean, this is true for just about any comic book company. Like, I don't read Marvel at all because it's a mind fuck. Everything that they're doing, it's an absolute mind fuck. All the interconnectedness is just crazy, and it's happening in the movies now as well, where nothing really feels special anymore. If I was DC, I did like Major X. I read Liefeld's Major X. That was pretty cool. But if I was DC, I would make separate universes out of all these characters, let them stand, which is actually how it used to be. Like, World's Finest was the thing, but you really didn't get a mixture between Wonder Woman and Superman. Not too much. They largely operated in independent realms. And I think they should go back to that. Because it's just their universe is not working at all. And they ran into this before. That's why they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, or on Infinity Earths, whatever. But anyway, so yeah, I read Green Lantern by Grant Morrison. That's awesome. I read Dynamite is doing a great job with classic Battlestar Galactica. Fuck the new Galactica, but classic Battlestar Galactica, they're doing great work with that. I've been reading that. I've been reading IDW's, what are they up to, Fight Club 3. They're doing sequels to Fight Club. Chuck Palahniuk is on board. Those are awesome. I've been reading that. Dynamite's Zorro comic recently, the Zorro titles they've been doing are really great. G.I. Joe, I still read G.I. Joe. I'll tell you, and I think this was my comic pick. I'm pretty sure this was my comic pick for 2018 for Comic of the Year. Boom Studios has an entire Power Rangers universe really now. And they just got done with their big event, Shattered Grid. And fuck, this is such a great comic. It's still the best comic out there. Nothing else is even coming close to being as dramatic and to doing such innovative and such cool and great and badass things with a property, with a franchise, as Boom Studios is doing with Power Rangers. They are killing it. It's so great. Lord Dracon is... Well, I'm looking at my Funko Pop right in front of me, right next to, near in the studio. There's Lord Dracon right there. Hell, I even use that for my Twitter handle. It is a just intense, hardcore comic book. Best thing going today. It really, and they know it's the best thing going today. Don't get it fucking out of your head. Get it out of your head that this is some kind of kid stuff. Not even close. It is awesome. That is the must-read stuff. Every single Wednesday when I get my hands on it, I'm reading Power Rangers. God damn it, it's good. Oh, so that's basically it. Something. And I know I've had other people ask me, like, is there something you would read from Marvel? One of my favorite characters in Marvel is Doc Samson. If they did, I think they should do they're making a title for fucking every other asshat. Make a Doc Samson comic. I'd probably read that. You could do interesting things with that. Or it could be more psychological. I think that'd be really cool. Hell, if you want, do a Doc Samson She-Hulk comic. I'd be on board. She-Hulk. Big fan. It's another thing that pisses me off with the Deadpool movies. She-Hulk was Deadpool before there was a Deadpool. Breaking the fourth wall, being comedic, all that crap, and she did it better. Fuck Deadpool. God damn it. Those movies, they're good, they're funny, I get it, but at the same time, fuck it. Why does every goddamn thing have to be a comedy today? Everything's fucking sarcastic. Everything. And I get it, maybe it's just a byproduct of the fact that everybody's realizing that the civilization we live in is bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all, well, like the book goes, simulation and simulacra. It's all crap. Maybe that's what people are responding to. But God damn it, then let's reclaim art and put some serious shit out there that has some serious fucking commentary, like She-Hulk did. And did it better than Deadpool. She could be funny too, but she'd be funny. Anyway, whatever. Just fuck Deadpool. Okay, so I like Rob Liefeld fine, but fuck Deadpool. Okay, so anyway, so there's the titles that I read. Boy, all right, so we're about 40 minutes here. Let's get into. So you see, guess what? I don't hate all entertainment. I still read comic books. How do you feel about that? We good on that? All right. So kind of a challenge, a gauntlet that I threw down in episode 332. this is nice. All of this actually kind of hits the abstract of what episode 332 is about, with DRM, IP, and entertainment and all that. I laid down a bit of a gauntlet, I think, earlier in the episode. Someone obviously responded to it, where I was talking about, I think we were actually talking about Dragonfly, which is a rotorcraft, basically an automated helicopter, or an automaton helicopter, more or less automaton, that, is going to be sent to Titan. It's going to arrive there in the 2030s. To the Saturn's moon of Titan, and is going to look around on Titan. It's going to hop around, with its helicopter blades, with its rotors. And I brought up the conversation, and this is part of it, but I brought up the conversation of questioning the ethics, and this came up years ago on Sovereign Tech, about what right do we have to even step foot on another celestial body? I don't want to just say planets, because we could be talking about, the asteroid Ceres in the prime asteroid belt, or we could be talking about Mars. Hell, we could honestly be talking about the moon. What right do we have to interfere with any potential life on these celestial bodies? Okay, on these planetoids or whatever. Because, stepping foot, say there's even a microbe somewhere. Stepping foot could kill that microbe, and that microbe in, 65 million years could end up being a dinosaur. Or after so much time could end up being a, something sapient, like humanity. And I mean, I think that's a very important ethical conversation to have. Now, I'm not saying that I'm intelligent enough to even have it on my own, or at the very least to come to a conclusion or answer. I'm not going to claim that. I've brought up a few times, I've mentioned how, with the Culture series by Ian Banks, which is the most popular anarchist, I'd say anarchist fiction in general, or fiction, just saying fiction in general, book series out there. It did money. Amazon's making a TV, or a series out of it, out of some of the books anyway. But it is science fiction. Certainly the top anarchist science fiction work, or, series anyway. Single books, well, The Dispossessed is kind of part of a series, right? But, because it's in line with Left Hand of Darkness and some of Ursula's other works. But, yeah, I think it's fair to say it's the most popular. And in that, you have humanity, which works in conjunction with AI, that they exist basically in space stations. They live on space stations and not on planets anymore. And part of that is that they have such an extreme version of Star Trek's Prime Directive, where they just don't want to interfere with the development of life on any planet, that they live on space stations in a, anarcho, perhaps, if you want to call it socialist, kind of post-scarcity civilization. Okay? And elements of that within the Culture series, I think, are right on. That's where humanity should, maybe could, evolve to, to get to that point. Maybe. Elements. Like I said, just elements, not all of it. And so all this stuff has come up before. But I said I would love to have that big conversation around that. I don't know if we're going to have the big conversation here, but let me read the question. Because I made a comment, I said that maybe, humans shouldn't be using roads, but they should be flying everywhere as well. Well, here, let me read the question. And there's a lot of periods in this question that got sent into me. So it says, episode 332, Sovereign Tech. You said we should fly and there shouldn't be roads. You said we had to ask you to talk about that. You said you'd love to talk about that. Talk about that. So there's periods in all those pauses. Very funny way of saying that. Okay, I'll talk about that. I'll give you a gist, because I don't want this to go terribly long, but just to give you a basic rundown of what I was saying, or what I meant around that. So speaking of anarchist authors, or people that want to claim to be anarchist authors, Walter Block. I mean, he's shown even by other ANCAPs that, you know, he doesn't really live that anarchist life. Okay, his principles are in question, particularly when he wanted to go like suing, I forget which newspaper it was, and I know a lot of people who really waved that ANCAP flag and people who are actually also successful in life were very pissed off about that. They did not like that he was doing that at all, and they thought it was way out of line with his principles and things that he's espoused himself. Anyway, Walter Block actually wrote a tremendous book about the privatization of highways. And he was basically responding to what most anarchists or libertarians have to deal with when they're talking to a statist who comes out and says, but who will build the roads if, you know, there isn't a government and there aren't taxes and all this. And Walter Block's book, it's a huge book. I've read it, and fuck Walter Block. I don't like Walter Block at all, but that's a goddamn great book. And it asks, in my opinion, very powerful questions and has very powerful statistics. And it basically starts off with the premise of, I mean, his ultimate answer is who's going to build the roads? Well, the same people that built the first roads. Private industry, which is exactly what happened 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. And they did just fine. But he raises the question, just in the introduction he's bringing up, he's talking about, he says, so statistically, 30,000 people, 35,000 or so people die a year in road-related accidents. Okay. And so his whole premise is like, well, who says we even need roads? And that's not to get into some Back to the Future Part 2 kind of bullshit. Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads, blah, blah, blah. But there's something actually to that. To what I think, to that line from Back to the Future Part 2. Anyway, he brings it up that, like, maybe roads are the problem. You know, maybe it's not cars that are killing people. It's actually the roads themselves that are killing people. And it's a brilliant thing. And he doesn't go far enough with it. But I'm still going to give credit where it's due. It's an ingenious book. It's a very, very brilliant, well done book. And there's really, I can't even think of another one like it that even bothers to like go there and to ask those questions, right? Anyway, so within that, like I actually kind of agree with where Walter Block was kind of hinting, but didn't go all the way. One, that maybe roads themselves are not a brilliant innovation, are not like the best way to travel at all. In fact, statistically, we've known this for decades. Statistically, the safest way to travel is to fly. Now, I know there are some people who are in Sovereign Tech's number and in the audience who actually could, talk about a lot of the problems and challenges within the present air transportation system, like the present problem with airports and all this. In fact, I've wanted to do a show like that literally for years. That I might still do and have guests on that are experts in that field to talk about it, because there are various challenges with this. But the point that I want to make to you, saying all of this, is that on a couple levels, one, that flying is statistically the safest way to travel. And, Silicon Valley is actually working on flying cars. I mean, that is something that's, Google's working on that. I mean, there are companies that are trying to make this an actual thing. But I don't want to we don't necessarily need to get into that, though I think the argument could be made that roads are inherently problematic for a lot of reasons, just as far as travel goes. Deaths and some other things, getting into that. And I know what people are going to want to say. They're going to want to say, well, people can't even drive. How the hell are they going to handle flying? I think that there's ways to solve that. And I think actually flying, just by the very nature of flying, would allow for a much more interesting and still safer mode of travel than it is to get, sitting on four wheels or sitting inside of, a metal box with four wheels. That is a completely separate conversation. The point I was getting to, as it referenced Dragonfly, is that, I think cities inherently are antithetical to the health of a human individual. To say nothing of, if you want to get into ecological, not environmental. Environmentalism is a economic scheme. Okay, and it's a religion. Two things I don't like. Okay, I don't like, and not just scheme, it's a scam. Okay, the environmentalist arguments as the government proposes them, 99% of that is all stuff to just create jobs and to keep people getting paid. It is not, they are not arguments, they are not things, even like the Green New Deal and all this other crap that's been proposed. It's all about just trying to create new jobs. It has, I mean, it's even in the name, the New Deal. That's what that was all about, was creating jobs back when FDR did it. It has nothing to do with actually giving a shit about the environment. Okay? It's just trying to put a Band-Aid on the civilization as it stands that, frankly, the Band-Aid needs to get fucking ripped off already, and it just needs to collapse, and eventually it's going to anyway. Like, the nature of the system that we live under, and I don't mean that just because government is in control. I'm saying the way that that civilization, Western, whatever, works right now is not sustainable. And I don't mean sustainable as in we're going to run out of oil. I don't mean sustainable as in like, oh, well, you know, these aren't renewable resources or anything like that. I mean, that there's elements of that involved in this, but I mean basically that like this, we have to grow. You know, there's got to be continual expansion and more money made and all this crap that is absolutely not sustainable. And I don't think that's opinion. I think that's fact. Now, cities and things of this nature, okay, or even like the highway system and some other stuff. All of these things are, I mean, first off, understand that the highway system, and I don't even know if this is, I don't even remember if this is in Walter Block's book, but the highway system, impressively when it was devised, which was back in, I think, the 50s, or maybe the later 40s, is after World War II. The highway system was impressively, which considered the, you know, especially the interstate system specifically, not just the highways, but the interstate system, which was the basis for highways. The interstate system in the United States was like a 24-page bill. Just think about the scale and the scope of the interstate system and everything that's built around it all fit into a 24-page bill. When you consider now that the average bill that goes through Congress today is usually paged in the thousands of pages, right? It's remarkable that it was that simple. It says a lot. But understand this, the interstate system had a singular purpose, which is probably why it was only 24 pages, and that singular purpose had nothing to do with you getting from, you know, Wisconsin to New York. It was entirely about the military getting between, you know, from coast to coast, getting from state to state, in case of like invasion and things like this. Because after World War II, I think a lot of Congress was just thinking, all right, when's World War III going to happen? And a lot of people thought in the 80s it was. I mean, you even had Red Dawn, right? Remember that? You know, where the Soviets invaded and all this stuff. Anyway, go Patrick Swayze, or what do they yell out? Wolverines! Anyway, so understand that the roads, a lot of the roads, as you understand them, were designed for one thing. And it's not just, this isn't just true of the 20th century. This was true hundreds of years ago, during like even the Florentine Renaissance. The roads were designed for the movement of the military. Roads in and of themselves, roads as you think of them, freeways and all this other stuff, was ultimately initially designed for the movement of armed forces. That is their purpose. Cities were built originally. The original, cities as we understand them, the concept of the modern city, which basically all of that kind of stuff, you know, cities as they exist within like a mercantile system, say capitalism or whatever, all come out of, or largely come out of the Florentine Renaissance. You have things like the Agora and stuff that you can kind of point at, but even that, like Greek cities, which if you want to consider those like the first more modern city, fine. You can go that far back if you need to. Go back 1,500 years before Florentine. Hell, go back to the Egyptians. Fine. Let's go back to the Egyptians. Hell, let's even go back to the Sumer. Okay, we can go back as far as you want. You want to go to Uruk, like the first human city? Fine, let's go back to Uruk. These cities, and I've read the books. You can read the books. Multi-100-page volumes. Okay, about these cities. They were initially designed for the king or whoever was in charge at the time, for armies to be able. Was trade a part of it? Sure. But a lot of that stuff was done by what, to the royalty was considered undesirables, and that was meant to be done outside of the city. Okay, but a lot of it was meant for how quickly can my armed forces, be it the pharaoh, the king, whoever, how quickly can my armed forces move from one point of my kingdom to the other? That is the purpose of roads. Why? And so my, part of my premise here is why are there 35,000 deaths a year? Why do people suck at driving? Why do people blah, blah, blah? Because perhaps the concept of roads themselves, I'll get into some of the safety issue, I guess. The concept of roads themselves was never meant to be something for the individual, for the average person to use as a mode of transportation, blah, blah, blah. It was always designed for, it's at the very heart, it is meant for killing. And I know you people are going to say, oh, that's so extreme. Who else is talking about this stuff? No, it's not extreme. It is the reality. If you had a sense of goddamn history, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. And you'd know it's the truth. It's to facilitate trade. No, trade was done by boat. And traveling in the air is basically the kind of the same process where you're traveling, where there's not like a defined way of going, like on a boat, you can go just about any direction. In the air, you can do the same. Anyway, this is a huge topic. Okay. And I'm already over an hour and I could talk about it forever. So there's that. Okay. But the point I'm getting at here is that I think cities are inherently a problem. Roads are a byproduct of city life. Okay, and there are, so take all the health issues that come along with being in a city. That's a conversation I've had quite a few times on Sovereign Tech. If you want to ask about that, fine, I can get into it in the next Q&A. I do not have time to get into that here. But there's plenty of other podcasts by other people who have talked about, there's books on the matter about how living in a city is tantamount to putting humans in cages. Constant tension, constantly stressed. It's bad. Now, and this is one of the problems of Silicon Valley, because they want to get everybody into the, new versions of city states. Oh, fuck that. Anyway, so for humans to get around, humans are still a social species. They would still live in communities, but how these communities would be devised without militaries, I think, and without the desire. Okay, and this is the start of my premise, really. But for communities to be built up around not defense, not being built around we're going to attack and conquer another land, or we are concerned we're going to get conquered, blah, blah, blah. For communities not to be built up around that, you are not going to end up with a city. You're going to end up with something that looks very, very different. And for humans to to travel from community to community, honestly, I think what would by nature happen, and look, if you want to argue with me, yeah, but without cities there wouldn't be capitalism. Well, you might be right about that. Without capitalism there wouldn't be airplanes. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but regardless, there are systems that we get past, and perhaps we take advantage of what came out of previous systems. Okay, airplanes becoming a big thing, that's another conversation as well. Because, talk about patents and IP. We wouldn't have airplanes if that kind of shit was in place. But that's another conversation. Again, this is very big. And it would literally take hours upon hours to talk about. But my point being is that I think flying machines of whatever ilk that is what would be used to get between communities. And I would argue that if you are concerned about not environmentalism, but ecology, the ethical way for humans to travel would actually be by flying, to where you're not perhaps interrupting nature and other things. Okay, This is far out stuff. This is talking like, anarchist, paradise kind of situations. I recognize that. But that's what I'm talking about. Okay, that's how you do it. Now, I'm going to get a little historical on you quick, okay? And the historical I'm going to get on you is that I don't think it's interesting that, like, the first, say the Sumerians, who you had the Anunnaki, right? Which they're not aliens. The Anunnaki are not aliens. Do I think they were real? Actually, I do think they were real. I think the Anunnaki were real people. I think they were human. Or at the very least, hominid. And native to Earth at that. It's interesting that they keep getting called those who from the heavens came. Like, that's usually, like, or they'll call it, in fact, actually, when Christopher Columbus landed in North America, the Native Americans, even though Columbus and his folk would say, or, and his party would tell the Native Americans, no, we came by boat, we came by sea, we're just from another land, across the ocean. They would tell them, they would say that. The Native Americans still called them people from the sky. Okay? And so I think there's something in that we have historical precedents where people who just came from faraway lands, not from outer space, fuck that, not from any of that stuff, where they still get called people from the sky. Now, maybe that's just because they looked advanced like previous people from the sky that the Native Americans had known or had encountered, but regardless of that, I think when you hear that kind of thing historically, I think what you're really dealing with is, honestly, advanced humans from some holdover civilization that could have been, that's stuff I've talked about on Sovereign Tech in the past, and that civilization to thrive in isolation and in peace. I think that air travel, and that's why they get called people from the sky, I think air travel was their travel du jour. And I think that they did that out of, and I know I'm speculating here in some of this, but its basis is in ethics and in history, okay? Which I just described a ton of that. I think that they ethically and technologically got to the point where they realized, no, this is how we need to travel. And how we were not it appears they did interfere, like the Anunnaki did interfere with the development of the Sumerians, okay? But to do so in a way where, well, see, now I have to get into really wild speculation. But bottom line being, I think that, an advanced culture does travel by air to not interfere with the development of whatever else. Other forms of life, other cultures, less advanced cultures, whatever. They kind of operate under their own prime directive in a way. And it's a microcosm, perhaps, of, what you could imagine the Federation would do in Star Trek. But instead of traveling through space in starships, they're just traveling around the Earth in airships. I agree. Like that's a lot of the megalithic sites that you see on Earth in South America, even, parts of Europe, other places, where it looks like there's like these landing pads. I don't think that was aliens. I do think, though, that those were very basic airports for this advanced civilization that still traveled via airship. If you want to get into Vimanas and stuff like this, in ancient Indian culture, that's another direction to go with this. But it's interesting that these advanced civilizations that we read about, maybe they're just legends. They're sure as fuck not aliens from outer space. They're not. Fuck ancient aliens on that. That's just not so. But if it's an advanced human culture, it's interesting that they're all traveling by air. And I wonder why. And are they perfectly ethical, anarchistic civilizations? I'm not going to argue that they were, that these past advanced civilizations were that. But it is interesting that it seems like airships that was their method, or, some kind of air travel was their method of travel. So, yeah, I think if we got to a point where it was an advanced, human, empathetic, anarchist civilization, I think air travel would be how it would work, and communities would build up around that, where it's like these pockets of communities. It's not that we are like overrunning the earth with cities everywhere, and it turns into, Trantor or Coruscant, right? Like out of science fiction. Even though, sadly, I think we are heading towards William Gibson's Sprawl. But if we were going in the more ethical, empathetic direction, I think things would be very different. It'd be the exact opposite of the Sprawl. But that doesn't mean it still wouldn't be advanced. So anyway, that's what I've got as far as that goes. As far as like what the conversation that I wanted to have, that's touching on a lot of the high notes. So to make it a quicker conversation, there you have it. But you can already I hope you can see how much history we'd have to cover to talk about a lot of that. But I think we have very real evidence that, in saying getting away from the roads, I think there's evidence to suggest that. And I think, again, I hate to give the guy credit, but Walter Block did a lot of the yeoman's work to prove that so. So, all right, I'm not going to get into, I wanted to have a kind of a longer conversation around the album of the week for this episode, but I'm not going to do that. What I am going to have you do is check out a band in their entirety, right up to their latest work, which their last album came out last year in 2018. The band is Dynazty. Now, it's spelled funny, and they're out of Sweden. I'm not going to hold that against them. It's Dynazty. So I don't know if they like are trying to play on it being like Dynasty instead of Dynasty. It's Dynasty, like as in die nasty, two separate words, but it's one word. It's Dynazty. I was listening to them at the gym because I was trying to find something similar to Beast in Black, and these guys came up, and fuck, what a great band. There is some good shit here. Check out all their albums. In fact, there's their second to last album, and there's a song on there called The Human Paradox. Awesome. So I want you to check out Dynasty or Dynasty or Dynasty. I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce Z or what. I haven't heard. They're new to me, so I don't know. So there you get that for album of the week. Check out Dynasty with the Z. Dynasty. Go for it. Okay, that's it for your Wednesday Q&A. I'll be interested to see if I lose anybody after this one, because you might think I'm just a little too nuts. But frankly, I see who some other people, people that support me, who they're supporting. And if you think I'm nuts, woo! Okay. Anyway, I will see all of you on the other side. Woo!